Hi, welcome to this lesson on volume of cuboids and cubes in this case. We had a look at the formula in the last lesson about the volume of cuboids, which I've got in the top corner. The volume is the length multiplied by the breadth multiplied by the height. And we can apply that to cubes as well, because a cube is simply a special cuboid where all the length, breadth and height are the same. So it's part of the cuboid family. So we could still use the same formula. So this example here, calculate the volume of the cube. We could simply write it in terms of V. V is equal to L times B times H. And in that case, the length and breadth and height are all the same. So we could just go and do that. 5 times 5 times 5. 5 multiplied by 5 is 25. And 25 multiplied by 5, you do a wee calculation if you need to, is 125. 125, what? Well, my dimensions are in meters, so it would be cubic meters. So that would be fine. Sometimes you see the formula for a cube as a different one, and you see it as this, V equals L cubed. Because if you know the length, or any one of the three dimensions, all we know we're just going to multiply that by itself 3 times, which is the same as cubing something. So you might want to, if you like the idea, you just do that. So both of these are absolutely fine. If you like just sticking with the one cuboid formula, then that's fine. And if you like using the V equals L cubed, that's also fine. How would we work back with that though? Because the problem with the L times B times H is that if we want to work back, calculate the length of the cube, so you notice there's no dimensions at all, because when we work out that length, it's the same number in them all. The problem is, if just as maybe we did in the last lesson, if we use length times breadth times height, and we think of them as 3 different ones, when we substitute in here, and we say, well, we don't know we've got this idea, well, the breadth is just L as well, and the height's just L. It's difficult. We don't have anything to help us work it out. So in this case, the L cubed formula does actually work best. But even if you've got it written out like that, you can see that we end up with 512 equals L cubed. Okay. So how do we solve that problem? There's 2 ways to do it. You either just by a bit of trial and error, or by knowing your cube numbers, you might work out that what number multiplied by itself and itself again gives you 512. The more common way might be to use a calculator if it's not so obvious. So we would do this if you're familiar with the idea of undoing operations. We know that to undo a square term, we would find the square root of something. Oops, I don't want to put an equal sign. We want to do the inverse of that. So if you're trying to undo a cubed term, then you're going to find the cube root of that with a wee 3 there. So what we can say is we can take the cube root of both sides, and that effectively the inverse operations mean that we're back to L on its own. And we would reach for a calculator. If you can find the cube root button, it's usually that maybe it might have a button on its own, or it's got on your calculator you may have a button that's got X and it's got a wee square, white square. That's X to the power of anything. And on the shift or second function in that, you'll have a little root sign with a box there as well. And what we do is we just specify what root you want. So you press it on your calculator, you would press shift and that button, and you'd have to do it 3 first of all, wouldn't you? 3 to give us the cube root of, and then we would do that, and the number is 512, and we'd end up with the number 8. So just to clarify, if you're using a calculator, I'll just clear that up a little bit. What I would do is I would press the number 3, I'd then press second function or shift, and I'd press that button there because my second function is on the top of that, and then I'd put the number 512 in. And your calculator might be slightly different, but hopefully you'll find a way of working that out to get the answer 8. Okay, so let's write that in. We've got 8 there. In other words, the length of the cuboid is equal to 8, and it's centimeters because we're using cubic centimeters here. Okay, so that's using volume in terms of cubes. Just one other little problem solving question I'll throw in now that we're a wee bit more familiar. It says the volume of the cube is twice the volume of the cuboid. Calculate the height of the cuboid. So we've got a kind of double question there. We're saying what's the volume of one and what's the dimensions of the other. So here on the left hand side we've got the cube. Now we're going to be doing a number of volume calculations, and rather than just having v equals, it's good to be able to relate that to different shapes. One strategy that I've used and like to use is just numbering the shapes, so that if I call the cube number 1, then if I do my working and call it v1, then it's quite clear that I'm talking about shape number 1. Okay, or you could use words, volume of cube and volume of cuboid, but it's a nice quick way of doing it. So if you're working on questions like this, number your shapes clearly when you draw them out, and then we can just use the little subscripts. So v1 is a cube, so I'm just going to go straight with L cubed. Okay, you could use L times B times H, that's fine. So v1 is 12 cubed, and according to my calculator, 12 times 12 times 12, or 12 cubed, is 1,728. So I'm going to write that in, 1728 cubic centimeters. And you could write that in if you want somewhere, just to remind you, 1728. So we're going to use that number because you notice that the volume of the cube is twice the volume of the cuboid. So if V2 is our cuboid, the volume, we've actually got that information. It's 1728 divided by 2. And if I work that out, I'll do that at the side. Remember, any calculations you do, just write them like this. Don't do them right in the middle of your work, but you can use them like this. 17 divided by 2, it'll be 8 remainder 1. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I'm working with the number 864 cubic centimeters. I'm going to write that in, 864. Okay, so I've got a total volume. I've got 2 dimensions. I want to work out h, so we have to just start again by saying it's length times breadth times height. And I've got V2, I've got the volume because I've just worked it out as 864. This time the length is 18, the breadth is 6, and I don't know h. So we're back to the idea that we did in the previous lesson of working out one value here. I can move this on a little bit by working out 18 multiplied by 6. So I write down everything that I can't change. 18 multiplied by 6 is 108. So 864 is 108h. How do I move on that equation? Well, that's 108 is multiplying. So if I divide both sides by 108, that'll leave me h on its own. They'll cancel out. And all I'll need to do is to work out 164 divided by 108. I could use a calculator. I could try and simplify that as a fraction. But a lot of the volume stuff you're going to be doing with calculators anyway, so I don't mind at this stage if you're using a calculator. And I've got the answer 8. Okay, 8 what? 8 centimeters. So calculate the height of the cuboid. We can write down in words the height of the cuboid equals 8 centimeters. Okay, so that's just combining the different skills that we've been learning in a problem solving situation. I hope that makes sense and that it's been helpful.